In the next few minutes, I'm going to expose tequila brands Americans trust that are straight up scamming them, not necessarily by breaking the law, but by exploiting what the law allows, what labels don't have to say, and what most shoppers assume without verifying. If you've ever taken a sip and thought, why does this taste like vanilla candy instead of agave? You're not crazy, you're being managed. A lot of bottles are built to sell you smooth, not to sell you truth. This video is for adults of legal drinking age who want to stop paying premium money for premium marketing. The 10 brands Americans trust that can still play you. Casamigos is the perfect place to start because it captures the modern tequila illusion in a single bottle. It isn't marketed like a traditional spirit with a distinct agricultural identity. It's marketed like a lifestyle product. The pitch is always the same: approachable, smooth, easy. And for a massive chunk of the American market, that sounds like quality. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Approachable has quietly become code for engineered. Not engineered in a way most consumers can recognize, but engineered in a way that makes the flavor feel safer, softer, and more universally likable. That's why so many people take one sip of Casamigos and declare it the best tequila. Not because it's the most agave forward, not because it expresses terroir, craft fermentation, or careful distillation. They call it the best because it doesn't bite, because it goes down easy, because it tastes sweet and forgiving. But doesn't bite is not a quality standard. It's a comfort standard. It's the same logic that convinces people that the smoothest whiskey must be the best whiskey, when in reality, smoothness can be achieved by sanding down character until there's barely anything left. Real tequila doesn't need to attack your throat to be authentic, but it should still taste like agave. It should have a living plant note cooked agave, pepper, citrus oil, mineral dryness, and a natural heat that feels honest. When those signals get replaced by a signature that leans primarily sweet, rounded, and soft, you're no longer evaluating tequila as an agricultural spirit. You're evaluating a mass appeal flavor profile designed to win the widest audience possible. And that's the core issue. Casamigos doesn't build trust through transparency or through a profile that screams agave integrity. It builds trust by training your palate to equate easy with premium. Once your taste buds accept sweetness and softness as the definition of quality, you become easier to sell to, and you'll keep paying top-shelf prices for a bottle that's optimized for popularity, not purity. Clase Azul is where the tequila scam shifts into full luxury theater. This isn't just a bottle you buy, it's a statement you display. The heavy ceramic decanter, the ornate paintwork, the sculpted silhouette, the gift-ready presence, it's built to function like a trophy, and that's the first red flag. When a tequila becomes a social signal, the purchase decision stops being about what's inside the glass and starts being about what the bottle says about you. People don't buy Clase Azul only because they love the flavor. They buy it because it photographs well, it impresses guests, and it broadcasts, "I'm the kind of person who drinks premium." Once a brand reaches that status level, the liquid can become secondary because the packaging does most of the selling. Now, let's talk about the part people confuse most, the flavor profile. Clase Azul is famous for being sweet, sometimes intensely sweet, with a dessert-like finish that many drinkers interpret as craftsmanship. They taste vanilla, caramel, and a soft candy-like richness, and assume that must mean careful aging and masterful barrel work. But that assumption needs to be challenged. Yes, aging in wood can naturally create vanilla and caramel notes. That's real chemistry. That's the barrel interacting with the spirit over time. But there's a difference between natural barrel influence and a profile that tastes like syrupy confection. When the dominant experience feels like candy, frosting, or a sweet liqueur-style smoothness, it's not automatically proof of quality. It can also be proof of manipulation. Here's the key point. The tequila world has legal wiggle room in certain categories. The industry doesn't always have to explain how smooth was achieved, and the front label rarely tells you whether you're tasting patience and skill or tasting a product shaped to meet a luxury expectation. When a brand is built on status, the incentive is obvious. Make it taste instantly pleasing to the widest number of people, especially people who don't actually like the natural bite and vegetal honesty of agave. Clase Azul thrives in that exact space, where luxury packaging and dessert-like flavor combine to make consumers feel like they're drinking craft, when they may actually be drinking a carefully polished illusion. Don Julio, and especially Don Julio 1942, has crossed a line that very few spirits ever cross. It's no longer just a tequila, it's a cultural artifact. It lives in that special category of bottles people order as a signal, not as a flavor choice. They buy it to look like they know what they're doing. They gift it to look like they have refined taste. They set it on the table to look like they've made it. They post it because the name alone carries social weight. And that matters, because once a bottle becomes a status shortcut, the decision stops being about the liquid and becomes about the message. That's why the scam angle isn't that Don Julio is some underground fake operation. The scam is what happens in the American market once a brand reaches this level of automatic prestige. It becomes the default best without being questioned. People accept the reputation as proof, and reputation becomes a substitute for scrutiny. You don't evaluate it, you assume it, and that assumption is expensive. Yes, Don Julio has history. Yes, it has a legacy. But legacy doesn't protect you from modern market dynamics. In the US, 1942 in particular has become a shortcut for premium. And premium is often defined by one word: smooth. Here's the problem. Smoothness is easy to sell because it feels like quality, even when it's just comfort. If your palate has been trained to love sweet, rounded finishes, you'll interpret that softness as high-end. You'll taste a mellow, easy profile and conclude it must be craftsmanship, because it doesn't challenge you, it doesn't push back, it doesn't demand that you appreciate agave. But tequila is an agricultural spirit. At its core, it's supposed to taste like cooked agave first, earthy sweetness, peppery heat, citrus oils, herbal edges, mineral dryness. When a tequila becomes famous primarily for being soft and sweet, you have to ask what you're really celebrating. Are you celebrating agave character and distillation skill, or are you celebrating that it's easy to drink? Most people never find out because they don't compare. They drink Don Julio 1942 in isolation and judge it by how comfortable it feels. But if you put it side by side with a cleaner, more agave-forward tequila, you may suddenly realize something uncomfortable. A large portion of what you love isn't the plant, it's the softness. And softness, in tequila, is often the easiest thing to sell at the highest price. Patron is another classic trust trap, not because it's secretly fake tequila, but because its reputation has been allowed to replace verification. For years, Patron functioned as the American symbol of premium. It was the bottle people ordered when they wanted to upgrade their night. It was the brand that taught a generation what top shelf looked like. And once a brand becomes the default premium reference point, it gains something far more valuable than good reviews. It gains pricing power. That's where the scam lives. Patron didn't just sell tequila, it sold a benchmark. In the American mind, Patron became the measuring stick. And when a brand becomes the measuring stick, consumers stop asking the most important questions. They don't ask what makes it worth the price. They don't ask what they're actually getting for the markup. They simply assume the price is proof of quality. That assumption is exactly what lets legacy brands charge more than the experience in the glass consistently delivers. This is the price to experience mismatch that brand legacy can create. In many cases, Patron tastes fine. It's competent. It's clean enough. It's not the worst thing on the shelf. But fine is not what its pricing implies, and that's the trap. You're often paying for what the name represents, not for what the flavor provides. The brand carries a cultural weight that still influences bar menus, bottle service culture, and gift-giving habits. People order it because it's safe. They gift it because it's recognizable. They choose it because they don't want to risk looking uninformed. And all of that reinforces the brand's ability to command premium pricing whether or not the liquid is outperforming its competitors at that tier. Think of it like a luxury tax that doesn't come from the government, it comes from social conditioning. You pay a cultural tax for the comfort of recognition. You pay extra because it's the name your friends will nod at, because it's the bottle that won't raise eyebrows. And the industry loves this dynamic because it removes competition. Once shoppers buy by reputation, they stop buying by results. That's why Patron is a trust trap. Not because it's a fraud in the dramatic sense, but because it can leverage a premium identity even when the actual experience is merely acceptable. People pay the cultural tax and call it quality. And the moment you do that, you're no longer evaluating tequila, you're paying for a logo. Teremana is the influencer-era tequila scam. in one of its cleanest, most modern forms. Not because it's automatically bad, but because it's engineered to be purchased for identity first and liquid second. This brand doesn't lead with production details, it leads with a feeling. It sells the idea that you're choosing the honest bottle, the down-to-earth bottle, the good, simple, real person bottle. It's designed to make the buyer feel grounded and smart, like they're opting out of flashy luxury while still buying something culturally relevant. And that emotional positioning is exactly why it works so well. But here's the problem. Celebrity-owned tequilas are built for scale. They are built to move massive volume, to hold shelf space, to stay consistent across thousands of outlets, and to remain friendly to the broadest possible audience. And scale does not reward complexity. Scale rewards predictability. Scale rewards a taste profile that offends nobody. That means softness, sweetness, and smooth edges become the goal, because those traits generate repeat purchases from casual drinkers. A tequila that is strongly agave-forward, peppery, mineral, and unapologetically plant-first can be incredible, but it can also polarize. Mass-market brands don't want polarizing. They want universal. That's why the real scam isn't a dramatic accusation that a celebrity brand is hiding some secret villainy. The scam is simpler and more profitable. The product becomes secondary to the persona. The brand story becomes the quality signal. People don't buy Teremana because they've studied agave character, fermentation choices, or what good tequila should taste like. They buy it because they trust the personality attached to it, and they want the social meaning that comes with it. They want to feel aligned with the vibe. They want to feel like they're part of a community of in-the-know consumers choosing the right bottle. And when a tequila sells personality more than production clarity, your decision stops being about craftsmanship. A spirit is a process. Raw material, cooking, fermentation, distillation, maturation, and quality control. Those are the things that determine integrity. A story is not a process. A story is a shortcut. It tells you how to feel without requiring you to verify anything. That's what makes it such a powerful tool in the tequila aisle. Jose Cuervo is how Americans get scammed through familiarity, not through luxury, not through hype, but through sheer presence. It's everywhere: bars, parties, college memories, family gatherings, grocery shelves. And when something is that common, it stops being evaluated. It becomes the default. For a huge number of people, Jose Cuervo isn't just a brand. It becomes their definition of tequila. And that's where the trap begins, because whatever becomes your first tequila becomes your baseline for what tequila is supposed to feel like and taste like. If your baseline is a bottle designed primarily to be mixed, shot, and hidden, you will naturally assume tequila is supposed to be harsh. You'll think the burn is proof of authenticity. You'll think the roughness is normal. You'll expect the experience to be aggressive, unpleasant, something you chase with lime and sugar, something you drown in soda, something you tolerate for the effect rather than enjoy for the flavor. That mindset doesn't just change what you buy, it changes what you believe. And once you accept harshness as normal, you stop expecting purity. You stop asking, where is the cooked agave? You stop noticing whether the spirit tastes like plant character, roasted sweetness, peppery bite, mineral dryness, citrus oil. Instead, you judge tequila by whether it's survivable as a shot or whether it disappears in a margarita. That is exactly what low-integrity tequila needs you to do. Because the moment consumers stop expecting a clean, agave-forward profile, the market becomes easy to manipulate. Brands can compete on price, convenience, and familiarity instead of craftsmanship. That's why Jose Cuervo is such a powerful scam mechanism. It trains people to treat tequila as a tool, not as a spirit. It turns a category that can be complex and agricultural into something people just get over with. And that training creates a long-term payoff for the entire industry. If millions of consumers believe tequila is inherently rough, they will be grateful for anything that tastes smoother, even if that smoothness comes from shortcuts rather than quality. They'll pay more for sweetness and softness because they've been conditioned to associate less harsh with better. So the scam is not only what's in the bottle. The scam is what the bottle does to your expectations. Jose Cuervo doesn't just sell tequila. It establishes a low standard that makes the rest of the market easier to sell to. It convinces people that harshness equals normal. And once normal is low, anyone can look premium by comparison. Sauza is a similar trust trap, but it works in a quieter, more invisible way. It doesn't rely on celebrity hype or luxury packaging. It relies on being the bottle that's always there. It becomes the rail default, the tequila that shows up behind bars, in banquet halls, at casual restaurants, and in home cabinets because it's inexpensive, familiar, and easy to stock. And once a brand becomes that default, people start calling it trusted, without ever asking what that trust is actually based on. Here's the key issue. Sauza is trusted because it's present, not because it's exceptional. Presence creates perceived legitimacy. People assume that if something is everywhere, it must be acceptable. If every bar has it, it must be safe. If it's been around forever, it must be real tequila. If restaurants keep pouring it, it must be a reasonable choice. But none of those assumptions are quality standards. They're convenience standards. They're distribution standards. They're business decisions made by owners who care about cost, consistency, and speed, not about what your body is processing or what your palate is experiencing. That's why the scam isn't a dramatic claim that Sauza is unusable. The scam is more subtle and far more common. People treat shelf presence as quality proof. They treat ubiquity as validation. And once that happens, the brand no longer has to win you over with integrity. It only has to remain visible. The rail bottle isn't chosen because it's the best representation of tequila. It's chosen because it's a reliable, inexpensive option that mixes easily, pours consistently, and keeps margins healthy. That is the logic of the rail, and it's the opposite of what most consumers think is happening. The rail also creates a distorted tasting experience. Most people don't drink Sauza neat. They drink it masked, covered in sour mix, buried under sugar, diluted with soda, or drowned in citrus. That means the consumer never learns what tequila is supposed to taste like when it's clean and agave forward. Instead, they learn that tequila is something you hide. And if tequila is something you hide, you stop demanding quality. You stop demanding transparency. You stop expecting excellence. You accept the rail as good enough and label that acceptance as trust. So Sauza becomes a trust trap because it survives on familiarity, not on proof. And the moment you confuse available everywhere with worth drinking, you become the easiest customer on the market, someone who buys based on presence instead of purity. Hornitos is where the mid-tier illusion turns into a real problem, because it's positioned as the smart step up. It's the bottle many Americans grab when they've decided they're done with the absolute bottom shelf. But they're not ready to pay true top shelf prices. And that positioning is powerful because it makes people relax. They assume they've graduated. They assume they're making a better decision. They assume the work is done. But that's exactly why mid-tier can be the most manipulative tier in the entire tequila aisle. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Mid-tier is often designed to feel premium without actually behaving premium. It sits in a psychological sweet spot. It's expensive enough to create trust because consumers are conditioned to associate higher price with higher quality. But it's cheap enough to remain volume-friendly, which means the brand still has incentives to optimize for consistency and mass appeal, rather than uncompromising agave character. That is the danger zone. You pay more, you expect more, but the product is still engineered for broad acceptance. This is where the scam becomes subtle. It's not that Hornitos is automatically undrinkable. It's that the marketing encourages you to stop asking questions. The label, the price point, and the shelf placement imply that you're now in the better tequila category. So people stop comparing. They stop researching. They stop tasting critically. They treat the upgrade itself as proof, instead of judging what's actually in the glass. And mass appeal in tequila usually means the same things it means everywhere else. Soften the edges, smooth the finish, reduce the sharp agave bite that scares casual drinkers, and keep the profile predictable across millions of bottles. A truly agave-forward tequila can be bold, peppery, earthy, and mineral. It can have a clean heat that reminds you this is a living plant spirit. But a mass-market mid-tier brand often can't afford to be that honest, because honesty is polarizing. If half the market says, this tastes too strong, you lose volume. So the safest move is to create a profile that offends no one, even if it also excites no one. That's why mid-tier can be more deceptive than the cheap stuff. Cheap tequila doesn't pretend. It's priced like a compromise. Mid-tier tequilas like Hornitos often price themselves like progress, while delivering a product optimized for convenience and predictability. You're paying for the feeling of premium, not necessarily the reality of it. Cazadores often rides a reliable party tequila reputation. And on the surface, that sounds like a compliment. Reliable, consistent, easy to pour, easy to mix, easy to serve to a room full of people without anyone complaining. But that exact language is where the trap hides, because reliability at scale is rarely achieved by making something better. It's usually achieved by making it safer. And in spirits, safer often means less character, less variation, and fewer edges that remind you the product came from a real plant. Here's what most people don't realize. True agave character varies. Agave is agriculture. It changes with soil, weather, harvest timing, cooking decisions, fermentation behavior, and distillation choices. Even when a producer is skilled, a truly honest tequila can show slight differences from batch to batch. That's not a flaw. That's a sign of life. Craft tequila has edges because the spirit is allowed to be itself. It can be peppery, mineral, herbal, slightly smoky, slightly earthy, sometimes brighter, sometimes deeper. Those shifts are exactly what makes real tequila interesting. But mass market trust often comes from sanding those edges down. When a brand needs to deliver the same taste profile across massive distribution, the priority becomes predictability. And predictability doesn't reward the honest complexity of agave. Predictability rewards smoothing. It rewards minimizing anything that might make a casual drinker pause and say, wait, why does this taste stronger than last time? The easiest way to keep the widest audience comfortable is to reduce variation until the profile becomes almost interchangeable. Soft, rounded, easy, forgettable. That's why Cazadores becomes a party tequila. It fits the role. It behaves the way people expect tequila to behave in a loud room. It disappears. It becomes a mixer base. It becomes a shot. It becomes something you don't have to think about. And when consumers don't have to think, they also don't scrutinize. They don't ask how it was made. They don't ask whether the flavor is being shaped for mass approval. They accept reliable as a quality label, even though reliability in tequila can sometimes be the opposite of authenticity. The scam isn't that you can't use Cazadores at a party. You can. The scam is the reputation itself. The word reliable makes people assume clean and well-made, when in reality it can simply mean carefully neutralized for broad consumption. Craft shows edges, agave shows personality, and mass market trust often comes from sanding that personality down until it's safe enough for everyone and memorable for no one. Mi Campo is a modern vibe bottle. It's designed to look like it belongs in the hands of someone who knows. Clean typography, sleek presentation, contemporary branding, the kind of bottle that photographs well on a bar cart and feels intentional in a gift bag. And that aesthetic matters more than most people want to admit, because in today's spirits market, presentation is often used as a substitute for proof. Mi Campo signals quality through design language and crowd-pleasing flavor language, and that combination is exactly why it belongs on this list. This is how the modern scam works. It doesn't scream cheap. It whispers premium. It doesn't rely on decades of history like old legacy brands. It relies on a curated identity. It makes you feel like you're making a smarter choice than the obvious household names, even if you haven't verified anything. It's not positioned as the absolute luxury flex, but it's positioned as the modern person's tequila, refined, stylish, and easy to enjoy. And easy to enjoy is the most profitable phrase in spirits marketing because it removes friction. If a tequila goes down smooth, mixes clean, and doesn't challenge the palate, it becomes an automatic win for casual drinkers. But tequila is not supposed to be a vibe first and a spirit second. Tequila is an agricultural product. The integrity comes from the agave and the process. How the agave was cooked, how it was fermented, what kind of distillation was used, and whether the flavor is driven by the plant or driven by optimization. Real agave-forward tequila has a signature that can't be faked by branding. It tastes like cooked agave, pepper, citrus oil, herbal notes, mineral dryness. It has a clean heat that feels alive. It doesn't need to be harsh, but it should have honesty. The scam with Mi Campo is letting modern premium vibe stand in for transparency and integrity. Many buyers assume a slick modern bottle equals a higher standard. They assume the brand's confidence equals quality. They assume the flavor's friendliness equals craftsmanship. But none of that is verification. A modern bottle can still be built for mass market approval. A smooth profile can still be designed to flatter the widest audience. And when the selling point is the vibe rather than the details, you're being trained to purchase based on perception instead of production. So the question isn't, does mi campo taste okay? It often does. The real question is, what are you rewarding? If you reward packaging and easy language over clear transparency and agave-first character, you're teaching the market that it can sell you a look instead of selling you integrity, and that's how the modern premium illusion keeps winning. Here's what the scam looks like in your glass. A clean blanco should not taste like vanilla frosting. If vanilla is dominant in an unaged tequila, something is off. A clean blanco should taste like agave, pepper, citrus peel, herbs, and mineral dryness. A clean aged tequila can have sweetness, but it should feel structured, not syrupy. When a tequila coats your tongue with a sticky, confection-like finish, that's not automatically luxury. That can be help. A clean tequila should taste like cooked plant sugars, not like candy. Real agave sweetness is vegetal and roasted. Added sweetness feels like dessert. The psychology behind trusted tequila. Americans trust these brands because they're visible. Celebrities drink them. Bars stock them. Friends recommend them. They've seen them for years. Trust becomes habit, and habit replaces investigation. And tequila is the perfect category for this because the average consumer doesn't know what to verify. Most shoppers don't ask about fermentation. They don't compare proof points. They don't taste for cooked agave. They just chase smooth. That's why this scam works. You're not being sold tequila. You're being sold comfort. There you have it. 10 tequila brands Americans trust, and the exact ways that trust gets turned into a weapon against shoppers. Not with obvious fraud, but with perception traps that work because they feel familiar. Celebrity halos that make you assume integrity without asking questions. Luxury packaging that makes you pay for a status object and call it premium. Smooth. Messaging that trains your palate to reward softness instead of agave. And label silence that lets the industry hide behind ambiguity while you fill in the blanks with trust. Here's what I want you to remember the next time you're standing in the tequila aisle or staring at a back bar. If a tequila's entire reputation is built on being sweet, easy, and dessert-like, don't automatically call it craftsmanship. Challenge it. Real tequila doesn't need to taste like candy to be high-end. Agave is a plant, not a pastry. When the dominant experience is syrup, vanilla frosting, and liquid caramel, you shouldn't be impressed. You should be suspicious. Because the more a bottle depends on pleasing everyone instantly, the less likely it is to be prioritizing honest, agave-forward character. And don't let everybody drinks it be your standard. Popularity is not purity. Shelf space is not proof. A higher price is not a guarantee. The tequila market is full of bottles that are expensive because they're famous, not because they're exceptional. That's the cultural tax, and Americans pay it every day without realizing it. If this changed how you shop, subscribe. Drop a comment with the tequila brand you want dissected next. And most importantly, stop letting trusted be the reason you buy anything. Trust is earned through transparency, clear production details, real agave character, and brands that don't need marketing tricks to justify the price. Transparency is what clean producers lean on, and it's exactly what scammy bottles try to avoid.